Right, the wait is over. Sitting in silence. Can everybody hear me? Particularly those people at the back. Jolly good. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the planning meeting of Woking Borough Council. I'm Councillor Carol Jewell and I chair this planning committee, which consists of 9 elected borough councillors, not everybody's here tonight, and a number of professional officers. There are a formal set of procedures which must be adhered to. First, the planning officer will present to the public the application, and then only those speakers who have registered to speak will be invited to address the committee. No one else, including borough councillors, town and parish councillors, agents, applicants, objectors or supporters, are permitted to address the committee, ask questions or interject in the meeting. Everyone has had the opportunity to comment on each application through the consultation process. There is a strict time limit of 3 minutes per category speaker, after which the committee will discuss and debate an application and seek clarification from the council's professional planning officers in order to reach a decision. It is the committee's responsibility to determine any planning application presented to it using current national and local planning policies and other material and relevant planning considerations. Our role is not to suggest alternatives to applications, nor to consider whether they are a good idea, or whether they're needed, whether they're too costly, or whether there are alternative uses. We can only focus on the proposal in front of us. Planning proposals can often generate strong opinions, both for and against the development. But disorderly conduct from members of the public or councillors will not be tolerated. And as chair, I have the discretion to remove individuals from the meeting in accordance with part 8.2.6 of the council's constitution. This includes suspending the meeting and or terminating the webcasting of the meeting. So that's the official bit out of the way. If I get on now to the agenda, first item is apologies.
Apologies from Councillor Wayne Smith, Councillor Stuart Munro and Councillor Rochelle Shepherd-Dubé.
Thank you very much. Item 30 is the minutes of the previous meeting. I take it that everybody's read those minutes. Is there anybody is against them, or can we all agree that's a true record? Agreed?
Show of hands.
Can we have a show of hands so we can do? Yeah. Oh, sorry. Okay, thank you very much. Next is the declaration of interest. I need to declare an interest in the first item, which is application 242147. As I've made various public comments on this matter, I've taken advice on whether this could constitute an appearance of bias and therefore have decided to not take part in the discussion or decision and will leave the room when this matter is reached, which is now. Over to you, Martijn. My very valuable Vice Chairman has reminded me I haven't done item 32, which is applications to be deferred and withdrawn, which I knew there weren't any, so I'd ignored it. Thank you. So it's item 242147.
Okay, so we can go to item number 33 on the list, which is the land outside Crockenwell Road, Woodley, about the kiosk.
Thank you, Chair.
You will present, and then we have, I think, Brian will. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This planning application is 242147 and relates to land outside 145 Crockenwell Road, Woodley. Full planning permission is sought for the installation of a communication kiosk towards the northern end of Woodley Precinct. The approximate location of the proposed kiosk is indicated by the cross on the photograph on the screen. The kiosk would measure approximately 2.5 metres in height, 0.8 metres in depth and 1.1 metre in height. On one side of the structure, there would be a free-to-use telephone, a defibrillator, interactive wayfinding information, and the kiosk would have Wi-Fi connectivity. On the reverse would be a digital advertising screen. The kiosk would be in a varied precinct, which has an array of street furniture, as can be seen in your photo pack. It is acknowledged that there are no other examples of this particular piece of street furniture within the precinct. However, in the context of a large shopping parade, the proposal is not incompatible with this retail location, nor would it harm a distinct or uniformed character. Highway officers are also content with the siting of the kiosk in terms of highway safety, as it would not pose an obstruction that would impede day-to-day vehicle or pedestrian movements. Concerns were raised by third parties regarding the siting of the kiosk and the impact it may have on Woodley's various community events. However, officers are not of the view that planning permission could be refused on the basis of potential disruption to the layout or functioning of ad hoc temporary events, given the proposal is compatible with the primary and day-to-day function of the land, which is a pedestrianised walkway in a retail centre. Overall, when taking all matters into account, officers do not consider the proposal will result in a substantial level of harm in any respect, and instead the proposal would result in some public benefits. Therefore, the application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions set out in the main report. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. Can we now invite Brian to the stand? Sorry, Brian. You have 3 minutes, Brian, and then we have to stop you, I'm afraid. So I'll give you a bit of a warning if we give you a heads up, but we can't go over that, I'm afraid.
All right, thank you, Chairman. Good evening, everyone. Okay, our objections to this application are primarily on grounds of safety. Paragraph 49 of the planning statement, the applicant states that all adverts are intended to attract attention. For the proposed advert points where drivers need to take more care and are more likely to affect public safety. For example, at junctions, roundabouts, pedestrian crossings, and other places where local conditions present traffic hazards. I would suggest that the proposed site is such a place. The area is regularly used for large contractor vehicles and at-home markets and events, with drivers trying to manoeuvre between the current plethora of obstacles, including supermarket trolley parks, cycle racks, lampposts, metal seating, concrete seating, and overhangs from a nearby building. In paragraph 55 of the planning statement, the applicant states that the installation of street furniture must be considered in relation to the effect of pedestrian flow. The installation of a new communication kiosk should advocate a coordinated approach in relation to street furniture and pedestrian flow. As the applicant has failed to highlight a lamppost, cycle racks, and a supermarket trolley park nearby, I would suggest that street furniture hasn't been considered in very much detail. And finally, on paragraph 2 of the planning statement, the applicant states that in areas with poor mobile coverage, public phone boxes can be the only option for making calls. I'm not aware that Woodley Town Centre has poor mobile coverage, but I'd be surprised if that was the case. The current public phone box nearby, however, is only used by 46 times in the year between August 2019 and August 2020. As we know, footfall has dropped since then, and I would suggest that the introduction of a second box will only dilute that 46 calls, and the new box is likely to be only used around about 20 times in the year. A similar case can be made for the defibrillators. There's 11 in the town centre. The one I'm responsible for has never been used in 6 years. I sense that the real reason that the application is being put forward is that they really want to just get the advertising revenue. There are several advertising sites around Woodley Town Centre, and I don't think it's necessary for a further one. And for these reasons, we'd like to object to the application.
Thank you, Brian. Perfectly within time. I appreciate your help. Okay. Okay, does anybody have any questions or comments about this one at this stage? Moses, yeah, go ahead.
I have two questions. How will this kiosk be powered?
It will be, I assume there'll be wires into the ground. There'll be a foundation base around the kiosk, and it is just assumed that it'll be wired in underground. I'm afraid I don't know the exact details of how it will be installed or the mechanics of the sort of generation of the electricity.
So you don't know, you don't think it will be self-powered?
Not that I'm aware, no.
What's the relative size of this kiosk to the nearest fixed furniture on that pedestrianized street? Because I know the place a bit.
I would say the nearest piece of street furniture would be a seat, a bench. So, yeah, it would be substantially higher than the closest bench.
Sorry, how does it compare to the existing kiosk there in size, relatively?
There is no existing kiosk there. It's a new installation.
There was a mention of a telephone kiosk.
There is another one in the centre. That one is to remain. So it's not replacing that one. In terms of height, it was probably be similar. It would be overall similar dimensions, albeit this kiosk is not going to be totally enclosed. So it won't have a door with 3 sides. So in terms of its depth, it won't be as deep as the existing phone box, but in terms of its other dimensions, I'd say similar.
So this new kiosk is totally unsecured.
Sorry, I'm having trouble with my microphone. It has. You should be able to see in the committee report on page 19. There's a sort of an image of what it will look like. So it will have one side and 2 open sides.
Sorry, so there's no enclosure, it's just exposed to the elements, yeah? Okay.
Just to jump in, Moses, sorry, a standard BT phone kiosk is about 2.1 meters tall. And obviously this is 2.5. It's a completely different design from a standard kind of enclosed phone box. So but again, as Connie was saying, it's not a replacement. We're just providing you with the kind of context of a nearby kiosk. So it's not reliant upon or being compared to visually. They're not next to each other. All right.
Okay, my final question then. So the existing telephone kiosk doesn't have wireless or mobile connectivity, yeah? It's just the basic BT phone box.
That's correct, yeah. It's just got the telephone function, no other functions.
Thanks, Moses. Yeah, is that clarifying some thoughts for you? Appreciate them. Yeah. Let's go to Craig. Craig, any thoughts from your side?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to speak against this application on the basis that, as I know this area quite well, this I see is completely unnecessary as any addition to the Woodley precinct. We already have a telephone kiosk. We already have a defibrillator in the centre, not too far from this location. This kiosk is going to create more street furniture where there's quite a bit of street furniture in the precinct generally. At that end, you have a bench which was referred to earlier, quite close. My concern is that pedestrians are going to be moving from around that kiosk and sometimes there are vehicles coming through there, some large vehicles for community events, as is stated. And I just don't see that this is going to add any facility that's of any use to local people in the area. If anything, it's just going to create more clutter for people who are partially sighted and people with disabilities. It's just yet another piece of street furniture that just gets in the way, and people have to. There's also comments in the report about from Thames Valley Police about vandalisation and other negative aspects to it. So for those reasons, I'll be voting against.
Thank you. Right, Sam, any comments from yours?
Thank you, Chair. I think looking at the plans, I think, and listening to what's been discussed today by some of the residents as well, I think that to me this looks like this is simply just an advertising screen with simply the phone box defibrillator attached to it. So to me it's sort of looking at it, and also I think agree with your comments, Greg, on the. I think it'd just be unnecessary clutter, and I think my worry would be that I know that there has been, there has been sort of antisocial behaviour issues in the area as well, and I think you could absolutely see someone using it to sort of smoke in, or if there's light lit up as well. I think there could be some issues, but I think I just don't feel like it's in keeping with the area, and I feel like it would just add clutter. So I think for that reason, I'd be looking to reject this.
Thank you. Oh, Andy, any comments from you?
Okay, thank you. I don't think there is any actual demand for setting up another payphone near current payphone. And I believe that the way this payphone make most of its profit is probably through the things other than phone, such as a large advertising screen. And this payphone with a large screen, which may cause obstruction to the people, vehicle activities, and street visions in the place. So, and I'm not so agree with these applications.
So what I hear is that, okay, in principle, I hear that we see sort of the main reason is concern that I have you guys is cluttering up a part. You guys don't see the possible need for it at this stage. And Moses, are you on the same wavelength or not yet?
I think if you listen to my question, you know I'm on the same wavelength.
So Connie, going back to this one, they don't like this concern about the clutter. There's a little bit concern about and also maybe potential vandalism, although I think you've addressed that partly, with the CCTV. Is there any, so what would be counter arguments that, okay, the need for it compared to, Brian mentioned that the other one hasn't been used as much.
Okay. So as sort of outlined in the report, in paragraph 8.1, that discusses sort of the need of the development. It's not really for us as officers to question the need of a development, as Councillor Jewell mentioned in her opening statement here tonight. This application has been put forward by the developer, and we just have to assess, is there a reason to refuse if it's harmful, and if not, we should be approving. So there's no real test for, is there a demand for a defibrillator or a payphone? Officers consider that having more of those functions, so more payphones in the town centre, more defibrillators, could be seen as a public benefit. In terms of the payphone as part of this proposal, it would be a free telephone. So unlike the payphone that's already in the precinct, which you have to pay for, this one would be free to mobiles, landlines, charities. The only fee paying call would be to international numbers. Obviously, defibrillators are life-saving pieces of equipment. So having another one of those in the view of officers would be a benefit and wouldn't result in any additional harm. In terms of visual appearance, as I've written sort of numerous points in the report, the view of officers is that there isn't really a distinct character to the precinct. It's acknowledged that there's a lot of various forms of street furniture, but it wasn't considered that this piece would be a tipping point or a piece that would be so out of keeping with what is already there to warrant refusal of the application. In terms of sort of highway related matters, as confirmed by our highways officer, it would not impede pedestrian vehicle movement to a substantial degree. Appreciate that people who are visually impaired or using mobility scooters, it will be another piece of furniture for them to navigate. However, there is sufficient clearance either side of the kiosk for them to still be able to use the space, and it wouldn't be dissimilar to all the other pieces of furniture already found in the precinct.
Okay, so I'm looking at the rest of the committee. So you have some positive things here that, you know, it can, you know, support part of the community. It can help, you know, with phone lines. It is seen probably more now than it was in a few years ago. People are using mobiles. People are using those sort of connections. I think I just want to go maybe to the highways. From a highway point of view, this will not cause any additional objections from your point of view.
Having viewed the site and having been there myself, and like any pedestrian shopping area around the country, there are things that are set out in the centre, you know, whether they're seats, flower beds, advertising things, they're set there so they don't impede the flow. And looking at the site here, there is space on both sides, about 3.5 meters on one, 500 meters, you know, on the other, that would not impede pedestrian flow, and it wouldn't impede access by emergency vehicles. And therefore, we concluded that there was no highway safety issues.
And I think probably the committee I look in the members from that point of view, that is not a reason we have concern about at this stage. Although Moses, please go ahead.
This is not a typical development, so I'm trying to wonder what benefits does this thing have compared to the concerns in terms of interference with the amenity of the location, because everybody pretty has a mobile phone. So what is really overriding consideration for having a mobile phone kiosk when the one there is not being fully utilized?
So as mentioned, the telephone as part of this kiosk will have the ability to make free calls. So unlike the kiosks that's already in the Woodley precinct where you have to pay for calls, this one anyone can go up to the kiosk and call any number, providing that it's a UK number. So whilst a lot of people might have mobile phones, if your mobile phone has run out of battery or it's someone that doesn't have much credit on their mobile phone, it could be a really useful piece of technology for certain individuals and certain demographics in particular.
I could just jump in, Vice Chair, and thanks, Connie. Just on the discussion over need, I don't need to repeat what Connie said about the kind of, it is not for us as the committee to determine whether something is needed or not, as the chair has made clear at the beginning. But in context to the nearby pay phone and this new kiosk, it's a known fact that there has been a huge reduction the last 25 years in number of payphones around the country, to the point where I think it's a fraction of what it used to be. And those remaining payphone kiosks are not being used, as the speaker has emphasised, if not at all. And therefore there is no market, viable market for payphones. As the committee will be aware, many payphones, especially the kind of 1990 onwards, have adverts all over them, whether it's KFC or something on the side. They are primarily used as advertising property. These new communication kiosks, whilst not having a payphone, have other things that obviously old-fashioned enclosed kiosks, which suffered from antisocial behaviour because they're enclosed, they're not surveyed, they can be graffitied. These modern kiosks, which are now widespread across the country, and they may not be in Woodley, but as I say, if you go 5 minutes into Reading town centre, that you will see them every 300-400 metres in the main town centres and precincts. These kiosks are what is either replacing or being put into the precincts. There is no control, or the council and the committee have no control over whether the remaining payphone, up, in close proximity to this one, is not removed by the operator in the not too distant future. And therefore the two comparisons you're making may not be comparisons that are material in the long term. It may be that this, again, the location of this is more suitable compared to something that there is intentions to replace. I don't know, and the committee doesn't know, and that's not for us to sort of predetermine. So just a bit of context on what we're looking at here. All right, thank you.
So we've heard there's some positive things. I mean, this is obviously equipment, tools that, there will be some demand for it. I mean, it's not a new thing. It will provide some service to the community. But then you have to balance against that one our concern that it creates clutter or maybe, blocking things, additional things on the side that maybe we don't really see. So it's that balance that we have to play out here against it. It's not a big concern from the highway for traffic, but it's the clutter and probably, versus the amenities that it can provide to people in Woodley. So that's the balance we have to make. And I believe, unless anybody has any additional thoughts on this one. Then as a committee, then you guys, we have to make a balance on that one. And then if already, go ahead, Moses.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think about what the officer said about people running out of credit. The only time maybe if you run out of credit and you will need this phone, it's an emergency. And in most emergency situations, you have free calls.
Just to add a bit further context, Moses, that's a very good question. Now, I don't have up-to-date information, but there is a large proportion, I think, up in 2020 to the year to date, there was about 25,000 calls made from public phone payphones, kiosks, to Childline and Samaritans and other kind of non-emergency calls made alongside emergency calls. But again, they may be in more remote areas. It's not for us to understand the basis of that evidence, but the people that are making calls from a phone box may not be in a emergency at that point in time, but it may be used by people that cannot, for safety reasons, make a call from a mobile at their home.
And
Yeah, and I think that's a really valid point, actually. And I think in my mind, I'm sort of thinking about, I'm weighing up two things. I'm thinking about, okay, the positives of giving the community access to a free phone and those types of emergency calls that may need to be made anonymously. But I'm also weighing up antisocial behavior in terms of maybe people that may want to use that phone for that same reason, that it's anonymous free phone that's open 24 hours a day, and what that might also attract as well. So I'm just sort of thinking about those two things at the same time.
And as I suppose the old phone is, maybe that's not what we're considering, but people are not using that one anymore because, as we said, people are not using those types of phones. But these new kiosks are more open to people. So I can see that balance, and that I'm also struggling a little bit with that pros and cons. That, you know, I'm not for clutter and making it harder on the you know, for people who are shopping there. But I also see the points that that Connie made, that this could provide a service to the community that could be there, and it's that balance, and that it's not that we have to sort of navigate through this one. And I think, Sam, you're in the same position as well. You also have the bit of the balance about maybe that people can vandalize it. I think maybe, Connie, you did say some things that I saw some things about the CCTV possible on it. Is that maybe something that can address that one?
Yes, so as part of the kiosk, they are built with an integrated camera on one side. As you'll have read in the report, the sort of bringing that camera into use and who will monitor that CCTV camera is cannot be secured as part of this application or under the planning process. That has to be a separate conversation between the police and the council. However, the intention of the applicant is to have an integrated CCTV camera on the kiosk.
And partly maybe addresses some of your concerns. I have one more question. It also needs to get permission from the Woking Borough Council Streetworks team. What does that entail? And
any works on the highway has to have a streetworks agreement, whether it's somebody digging up a road to put, fix a water main or something. It works exactly the same way. They need to get a license to do work on the highway. That's, even, once, if this application gets approved, it's still got to go through another approval process to allow work on the highway. So that controls when it can be done, what, I hate to say traffic management, what management systems have to be in place to prevent accidents, etc. So that still has to be agreed, but that's not part of it. The application process, that is part of it, a process you have to do any work on the highway. Put barriers up, how long they're going to be up, put ramps down so people get across any trenches. That has got to be agreed through the streetworks, as well as the timing as well.
So just for my clarification, so that streetworks is mainly focused about the installation, the timing, and the duration of the installation.
Yeah, and how movement is protected.
Moses, go ahead.
I'm just reading clauses 412 to 415, and the more I read it, the more I'm more concerned about the negative impact in terms of antisocial behavior. Because it says here, clause 413 says, page 20, 413. 413, 4.13. Yeah. And then 414, 415. And it says here, 415, the Wi-Fi can be switched off if being abused, and an escalation process to new world payphones should issues arise, which means there are concerns that it could be abused. Because I'm just thinking it could be, because it's mobile, and there's even concern raised there about loitering. The current kiosk there is a bit outdated, so nobody really goes there. But if you get a modern kiosk like this, it's probably going to cost more antisocial behavior than currently exists, in my view.
Just as a sort of general point, the applicant, New World Payphones, installs lots of these types of kiosks all around the country, and therefore has quite a strong working relationship with the police, just as a precautionary measure. And so a management plan has been devised between the applicant and police departments to factor in things, factor in mitigation measures and how to reduce any forms of antisocial behaviour or mismanagement of the kiosk. So I would say there is a precautionary measure rather than necessarily indicating that it will arise. It's just there as sort of a safety net.
Maybe I'm asking too many questions. But it says here the parish councils that are responsible for CCTV surveillance in their areas. That's what it says, 414, not the police.
No, as far as officers are aware, it's the responsibility of parish councils to monitor CCTV within parishes.
The police, Thames Valley Police, do not erect CCTV cameras themselves in kind of public places, because that would obviously that'd be a surveillance issue. But obviously, if a parish wishes to put CCTV up for public benefit and obviously monitor it themselves, the same way that any premises or property like the building we're in has CCTV at the entrances, and it's monitored by the council in their facilities team. So there's no difference. And likewise, New World Payphones would monitor this asset in exactly the same way as any other parish may be monitoring a bench that might be misused or used, bike racks, or any other kind of facility in a town centre. There's no difference. We as a council wouldn't be responsible for it. It wouldn't be our property, as with other street furniture in certain areas. And obviously, if it's damaged or if it's misused, then the owner would make a decision on how best to deal with that. So there wouldn't be any kind of fundamental difference just because it's this kiosk in Woodley. They wouldn't treat it any differently from the thousands of others across the country.
Yeah, I hear what you say, Moses, but if we have these kiosks, these are not the first kiosk in the UK. So there are places like that. I mean, I don't think it will attract suddenly more potential for vandalism than if it's not there. But you think it could attract more loitering or not?
I think I'm just thinking about weighing the pros and the cons here. You want to do something good, but you don't want the great to be the enemy of the good. So I want to be sure that if I vote either way, I'm voting for a benefit and not something that becomes a source of harm and more problem from the community as we begin to see higher incidence of antisocial behavior. So that's the dilemma that I have.
No, that's valid, I think so. So then you have, you still have that balance. I don't know if we want to. Are we in a position to have a vote or raise some things on it? Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think we've talked it through at length, and we've got the balances to think about. I'd like to propose that we vote against and turn this down on the basis of the antisocial side of it, in terms of the antisocial behaviour we've had in the precinct. Also, I'm not convinced about the highways argument, because there is a lot of throughput coming through there, and the more you have clutter. But the main argument from my perspective is you're cluttering up an area that doesn't need to be cluttered for very little benefit. I don't think the community will benefit greatly, and so that's my view. We should kind of put it to the vote and
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify just the thing. So if it would be your main concern is clutter, yeah, which is one.
street furniture, yeah. Thinking of disabilities.
Yeah, or unnecessary or unnecessary clutter in the area. And then you said potentially it could attract
There has been antisocial behaviour in that precinct, yeah, over the summer.
Okay.
Which it isn't.
Which is more linked to maybe the first part, I suppose, the clutter part.
Yeah.
Brian, go ahead.
Yes, if I could just jump in, sorry. There's four key issues there you've as a committee have highlighted, being antisocial behaviour, which Greg, you've mentioned has occurred in the summer. Obviously, officers have provided you with quite convincing kind of factual information as to how this kiosk, being a free phone kiosk with defibrillator, CCTV camera, Wi-Fi screen open on all sides and not enclosed, would be used and managed. And if there's a problem, obviously the owner would be dealing with that, and the case officers identified how a precautionary approach has been taken to that. There's also no objection in terms of public safety from any consultee, and the proposal is acceptable in light of comments from Thames Valley Police. Okay, there is already CCTV in the precinct, and if existing antisocial behaviour is occurring, this application cannot be linked to necessarily an existing issue. And so obviously if you wish to pursue that, you'd need to pursue it based on understanding those facts. And obviously if the matter went further to appeal, those matters would be tested. So the antisocial behaviour issue from a technical officer perspective, the consultees that have been involved, that's not something we would be advising refusal on. In fact, we wouldn't be the strongest reason for refusal. In terms of highways, you also have a technical highway comments raising no objections from access of pedestrians, vehicles. We mentioned people with disabilities. There isn't a technical reason to withhold planning permission on the basis of highways. If we are talking about clutter, visual clutter, and we're talking about character not in keeping with the character of the area, a telephone kiosk, whether it be flat, whether it be red, whether it be enclosed silver 1990 style, they're not inherently in keeping with anything because they are a product of their intended purpose, the same way a mobile phone mast is, or a street light, or a bench. It is not aesthetically in keeping with anything because it is serving a functional purpose. So again, if we are pursuing clutter and it is sufficient distance from other items of street furniture and there is no objection from your highways officer, and there is never a telephone box that in keeps with any of its surroundings, I guess officers would need more information as to what element of character not in keeping or clutter is the committee's concern if we are to begin to think about a possible reason for refusal in that regard.
Just as a point of information for the committee, I'm on the town council for Woodley, and currently, as I understand it, there is no CCTV cameras operational in Woodley precinct at the moment. There are proposals to introduce CCTV cameras over the next 3 months, as I understand it, but that's my understanding. Yeah, so I don't know if that helps.
I just want to go back to this clutter thing. So anything that, I can see why people maybe want to, minimize clutter in the highways. Yeah. So we want to minimize the additional, lightning or facilities there. But you're saying that that is okay, and is that not a sufficient ground to say, like, okay, you have this square, you have your shopping experience. What I hear here from the committee is like about the clutter. Do we want to put extra things there that would sort of impact that part? I can see the benefits for it, for that some people can use it, and I see that one, but I also see the challenge that this is a shopping area. Do we want to put additional facilities there to just for that part? You want to minimize the clutter in some of these cases, and that's the balance you have here in a way. This will add additional clutter. I am with you. That's maybe from the highway point of view, I don't see any risks here because it is wide enough. Probably, I think it's difficult to argue about for the antisocial behavior part, although that is there. But this clutter part is one, I think, that does have an impact, I think, on that part.
I'd say following Greg's comments and thoughts and reading the room, I think I'd be comfortable to vote against based on the clutter being the primary reason and the antisocial behavior being the secondary. Although I appreciate if it went to appeal, yes, there wouldn't be a strong argument, but based on all the evidence and what we've heard today, I'm comfortable with that.
Sorry. So in terms of clutter, it sounds like you're referring to visual clutter rather than any technical kind of obstruction. Not from a high-risk perspective, as you said. You're talking about visual clutter. So on page 29, you have a plan showing the location of the kiosk. It shows the full dimensions. I think it's the next page. Next 20, 30, 31. A larger scale plan. It shows the kiosk in situ. It shows the retail units to the west, and it obviously shows things like planting trees. It shows tarmac. It shows other, not too many other things within proximity. There is some seating to the south, indicated in white. You can see that the kiosk itself, based on the amount of available space, let's sort of put our sort of common sense hats on, it's not particularly cluttered, and the image on the screen doesn't show a particularly cluttered street scene for a precinct. And again, that's something members will have access to. They can see the unobstructed views straight to the end of the precinct. In fact, most of the obstruction is to the right with the natural vegetation. This, as the case officer has said, this kiosk is 2.5 meters high and quite narrow. So again, views are only attainable necessarily from one side or the other side, but when you're standing side on or passing it, its views are reduced. So again, in exploring visual clutter,
yes,
I think there's a need to be specific as to what harm is being caused here, because clutter is a consequence of something. And if it's a proliferation of adverts or street furniture, that needs to be possibly identified where the proliferation is. Likewise, if we're talking about antisocial behaviour, and Councillor Actor, you rightly say evidence has been presented around the table. This evidence of antisocial behaviour is not to do with this application. It's been identifiably linked to things that have occurred already in the area. So again, coming back to the point of what we're looking at, we're here to assess this kiosk, not consequences caused by other things that might already exist in an area, because that won't stand up to scrutiny.
Moses. Yeah, sorry, I was having a think about what Brian was saying.
I don't have any prior knowledge of antisocial behavior at Woodley Precinct. I know the place, and I'm personally not coming from the point of view of clutter because I know the place. In terms of, I don't know whether vehicles moving stuff, but my focus is potential antisocial behavior. And I look at 410 to 411, and it concludes here 415 on page 20. As such, officers considered that on balance. So we are councillors, and we interface with our residents. If officers conclude on balance that ASB is not a problem, and based on our experience of our area, we think it's a problem, surely we can come to a different conclusion. So, for example, I've been grappling with trying to get people put the lights back on a supermarket close to where I live in my ward. And sometimes I can't insist that the police solve the problem, but my residents keep writing to me.
So then we go back to Craig and Sam. Yeah. So your main concern is more about the visual cluttering than the highway type of obstruction cluttering, or am I?
I do have concerns about the highway side, because if you put a kiosk in there, the large vehicles that come in for the market and also the other events, they have to come past that area. And so you've got vehicles moving slowly through, you've got this kiosk in the way, then you've got pedestrians around. So that's a concern. And, you know, I've already argued about the clutter argument. So, you know, the other thing about that area is that some of those shops, they do put out temporary signs as well. So from a disabilities point of view, I've got concerns about, you know, we've got enough, you know, obstacles in the precincts as it is. That particular area, I agree with Brian, you know, that there's less there. But once you start putting a kiosk, that's reducing the available space for people to go round, whether they're in a wheelchair or otherwise. And there's visually impaired people that I see in the precinct as well, moving through. I just don't think the benefits outweigh the negatives on this one. So that's my position.
Andy.
Thank you. And I want to say a little bit more about the visual. And this kind of screen on this the Woodley Town as well. We saw that it's quite quiet and a comfortable and nice place town center, which is not, it's different from Reading town center. It's and it will cause the screen will cause the light pollution, and also will destroy affect the atmosphere of the street of this area. It's not London. It's not Reading town center. It's a quiet town center with some cafe and I don't believe it's a good style and to be so many screen and advertise on this area. We already have many. When we go outside on the street, we want to see more trees and view and shops, but not the screen. And we already have many screens these days. And I think and yes.
But yeah. Just to clarify that this proposal here tonight is doesn't contain and is not to consider the digital advertising screen. So that is subject to a separate advertisement consent application. So all you can assess here tonight is the kiosk structure and not the actual screen itself.
But I do hear concerns from the people that this is a sort of like a quiet shopping center where, you know, putting a kiosk sort of quite in the middle of that path will make it harder for people to walk around it. Maybe for the traffic, maybe they can go around it, but it won't make it easier, especially if it is in combination with signs already put outside and put in terms of people having cars and pedestrians there. And then the visual impact that, yeah, people don't people have concerns about that one at the moment, at this location, at this place.
When we look at applications in general, we look at the everyday, what's impact on every day. We cannot take account of the special one-off or temporary or once a month or once every 2 weeks activities, because that's not every day. What we look at in this instance is what will happen on a day-to-day basis. With special events like this, there should be management in place to ensure that any vehicles coming in do not impact with pedestrians, because it is the responsibility of the operator of such an event to ensure that there's no impact on pedestrians. So when we look at any planning application, it is for a normal day and not a one-off every month or things like that, because it's a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You go out there one day, you go out there 2 days later. That's what we look at. We don't look at special one-off things. Because I said before, they should have their own traffic management in place to ensure there is safety for other users.
I just wanted to jump in on a point about that was made by the committee on other signs being put out by shops, cafes there. Again, that is an existing situation, whether those temporary sort of billboards or anything that's put out, has consent. I agree with what the committee are saying, that a harmful proliferation of any structure in a town centre is not a good thing. The committee and the council retains the right to assess absolutely every single additional piece of street furniture that requires permission from here on into the future, and so it should in sensitive locations. The committee is right. This isn't Reading. This isn't London. But Woodley isn't Reading or London. It is Woodley Precinct. If people are using the precinct for, aesthetic value or accessing nature, possibly there may be better parks locally that they may get that nature rather than, outside Domino's or a vaping shop. But ultimately, it is a busy pedestrianised precinct, and this proposal is itself not unconventional or alien to any kind of retail pedestrian environment. And so ultimately, if members are talking about street clutter, character of the area, visual impact, that needs to be clearly identified to officers based on the information we're giving. And we keep coming back to highways, and we keep coming back to obstruction, and we keep hearing, obviously, there's no technical objection there. So again, I without sort of pushing members, I'm conscious we're coming up to an hour on the item, and it would be nice to have a little bit more clarity on some of the matters, because again, we have a recommendation in front of us, and the presumption within the NPPF is there is a presumption in favour of development unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The starting point is our development plan. It is in compliance with our development plan. Consultees raised no objection. The area in question is in front of you on the screen. We're talking about clutter. We've acknowledged around the table that it's very open. We've acknowledged that there are other similar, equal. In fact, if you look, you can't see it here, but at the far end of the precinct, there's a big round structure with adverts over it. Again, when each structure comes forward that requires planning permission, the council, as a local planning authority, and the committee, if they wish, local ward member, can request it's called in to be scrutinised. So the fear over the floodgates opening on other things, again, wouldn't be a reason to refuse this. Antisocial behaviour that exists in the precinct now is not a reason to refuse this. Other signs that may be put out aren't a reason to refuse this. So excuse me for being firm, but I think it's important before you make a decision, we give you as much information as we possibly can.
Thank you, Brian.
So yeah, Brian, you keep referring to existing antisocial behavior. I'm not talking about existing. I'm talking about futuristic, which is been identified here. And I'm saying, personally, I could come to a different conclusion from the officers that they think on balance, there are no concerns with ASB. As a member of the community, as a councillor, with proximity to what happens on a daily basis, if I come to a different conclusion, would that be a basis for refusal?
No, the conclusion, just to clarify, I was referring to Councillor Bellow's comment. So if there had been antisocial behaviour this summer, your fellow councillor had mentioned that, but a refusal reason on antisocial behaviour will need to refer to a development plan policy. It needs to be a planning matter which is not dealt with by either other legislation or other agencies. And obviously, as a council, a local planning authority, we are assessing a proposal. Crime is a material planning consideration. And if it's material planning consideration, crime is a material planning consideration. And if a development is presented to you, which due regard has not been had to the fear of crime, because a development can't cause crime itself because it's not built, it's not there. We're not a regulatory committee, we're not licensing, we're not looking at that kind of evidence. We're looking at a proposal and whether it is deemed to have an acceptable impact on the area or not. And if, for example, a proposal is put forward to you, which, for example, has no surveillance, for example, doesn't have passive overlooking, or creates an environment that is unsafe or would make people feel unsafe, then that is a material consideration. But in this regard, the evidence that's been presented, the consultations that have been undertaken, the fact that we're talking about a kiosk about this wide, with CCTV on it, a defibrillator and a free phone, which members have acknowledged can be used in different ways, mostly positive. We can't comment for anything negative because, again, it's not monitored by ourselves. It would be difficult for officers to provide a relevant policy link to possible antisocial behaviour. We can look at our relevant policies, but we do need to understand that from a policy basis.
But I think your concern is mainly that if you look at that highway, if you look at that picture, having a kiosk there is out of sight with the character. It is, and not, you know, that is the main reason maybe, and that is, Sam, I hear you as well. It's out of character with the openness of that street. And on top of it, maybe you have concerns that it might attract antisocial behavior that that can cause a risk and have a negative impact on that area and on the safety of the people. Yeah. Are those the two main things of your main things on that one? Sam, okay. So if we go back to that one. Is that your reason for your proposal to refuse it? And Sam, are you seconding that one? Okay, so we have one proposal is on that it is out of character with the open area. Yeah. Chair. Potential concern about antisocial.
Chair, sorry to interrupt. My name is Noel. I'm a legal advisor to the panel. Chair, just to assist with the robustness of your decision, I think it would be useful if Liam records the reasons for Councillor Bellow's motion. That is then checked with Councillor Akhtar as well, and then that is read out to make sure you're okay with that. I don't know if Brian would then want to intervene to see anything else he can add in terms of planning policy that backs that up, so that you're very clear on what's being voted for. Can I suggest that as a way ahead, please?
I think I was trying to get to, but maybe I was first trying to get
Chair, you
alignment first.
You absolutely were, but I thought I'd just make absolutely clear for you.
So I propose that we refuse the application based on the point about possible antisocial behaviour being increased in that area, and also the point about it's not in keeping with the area, plus the clutter point about the increased. How would you describe it? It's you know, another obstacle for people to get round.
Yeah. So I think that you were straying back into highways there under obstruction, which we've kind of, I was under the presumption we'd established that that wasn't a reason for refusal, is highways or obstruction. We've talked about visual clutter and antisocial behaviour. I would urge members to stick to those two matters because you've got a technical highway comment not objecting to this. I wouldn't. I think that would be a lot weaker than the former two. As far as I interpret members' concerns, is the development would be out of character with the openness of the street, causing harmful clutter and negatively impacting the area visually. Officers may need to work on that. The second reason over antisocial behaviour, the thing that concerns me is the use of the word perceived increase in antisocial behaviour. Again, it's coming back to this perceived. That is not evidenced, and that is not taking into account the mitigation measures and the content of the report in front of you. And I would be very concerned in pursuing that reason, unless members have any more information to give us, because of perception or perceived harm through something that, again, it would need to be a slightly more specific, in my view.
So I want to ask Brian, so what was the essence of the clauses 410 to 415? Because that seems to me as effort to dispel any concern about antisocial behavior. So if we have a report that is suggestive that you need CCTV, you need this, you need to put a plan in place, you need to monitor, that means you have concerns.
So Thames Valley Police were consulted on this application, and they did not object in principle, and they did not highlight that this area was particularly susceptible to crime. Their comments were quite generic, and from looking at other similar applications around the country, the comments Thames Valley Police have made are similar to other police departments in other parts of the countries. So these concerns about criminal damage, concealment, and sort of CCTV are general precautionary measures that Thames Valley Police and other police departments seem to be making on these types of proposals. These were not recommended in light of antisocial behaviour being detected in that area. It's simply just mitigation and precautions.
I would add that this would be a similar approach to any kind of other bit of sort of high-tech equipment, whether it be a cash machine or a vending machine. Even some of these come with alarms and cameras now, and information is transmitted back to the owner of who uses them or who's around them. As you may have seen in the media the last few years over surveillance from vending machines. But the point I think that Connie is making is that there is not any evidence here that this is an unusual, particularly high crime. As you've said, it's not Reading, it's not London. This is not somewhere where there would be a considerable worry or risk for an operator of a payphone to put one in. Again, going back to the point of need, it's not for us to determine whether it's needed in this area. And as far as the planning department are concerned, all possible precautions have been taken and have been covered by the applicant, by the police, by the council. So again, that's the kind of basis for our recommendation.
So, Chair, I think we should put it to the vote, and on the two objections that we stated at first, and we drop the antisocial behaviour, if that, because officers are advising that's going to be a problem for us.
So this is, it is mainly to do with the prevailing character that additional piece of street furniture will contribute to the concern over cumulative visual clutter. And even though maybe the officer, and then our concern is that the officer maybe thought this will not have resulted in a tipping point. I think some members of the committee believe it has reached that point. Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, I think there's one last thing. I think from my side, I wouldn't be against this in principle. I just think it's also in the wrong location. I think if this were to come back to committee in a more appropriate location, that's not maybe as obstructive.
Yeah.
That's maybe tucked away somewhere more hidden. That's not, and that would be to me that less clutter, less of an obstruction. And then I think if it came back in that form, then I would be keen to put it through.
Thank you. Okay. So this is the main reason then, Brian, is that fair enough? We have that, so the main reason is around the clutter, the additional piece of street furniture contribute to a cumulative visual clutter on the site. Can I ask the committee to vote on that one? Who supports Greg and Sam's proposal? To reject this one. So
this is a vote on Greg's motion that has been seconded by Sam, that it's got the one reason for refusal that it's not in keeping with the area, it's because of visual clutter.
Moses, yeah, you want to, shall we vote on that one? Yeah. I abstain.
Can I just confirm then, the development is out, just the refusal reason, development out of character with the openness of the street, causing harmful visual clutter and cumulatively adding to existing street furniture, contrary to policy CP3. The local plan.
Okay, let's get on with the rest of the meeting then.
Just
Oh, beg your pardon. Oh, of course, yes.
We're
Okay.
doing a swap, so just give us a minute.
Okay, we've lost the case officer for a moment, so bear with us. Right. Okay, it's application 232490, land off Langley Common Road. I'd like to invite the officer to speak to the application. Mark.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'll just upload my presentation quickly. Okay. So just before I get into my presentation, there is one update to draw members' attention to. So at the time of writing the supplementary update, there were 9 additional representations received, and I've summarised them broadly there, and also put the general issues that are in the officer report. Since then, so since yesterday midday, we've had 7 additional representations. So I'll just quickly go through those just so that members are fully aware what's been received. So there were 7 additional representations with some broad issues. One of them was use of the field for amenity and forest school type activities. That's not an issue addressed in my report, actually, but just to clarify, there is a public right of way across the field, but there's no public use permitted on the field. So any use of that nature is purely a permissive base of the landowners, but that's not the lawful use of the land. It's an agricultural field with rights of way going across it. The other issues raised were flooding, drainage, loss of green space, traffic and highway safety implications, the speed of traffic along Langley Common Road, congestion, lack of local facilities, loss of wildlife and natural habitat, reduction of visual and perceived separation between Arborfield and Arborfield Cross, loss of privacy and overlooking. And as I say, Chair, they're issues that are addressed in the officer report, so I won't go through those in verbatim at this stage. So just moving on to the presentation, as you can see on the screen, the description of the development is outline planning application for a proposed residential development of up to 50 dwellings, together with open space and associated works, means of access to be considered, with appearance, landscaping, layout and scale to be reserved. So it's an outline permission. It's an outline permission where the members are just considering means of access in the principal development at this stage, with those 4 matters being reserved for reserved matters application. So just going through some slides just to give members a sort of flavour of the application. So the red line is the location plan you can see on screen. There is a blue line members will make out. That's just land that's in the ownership of the applicant, but that's not part of this application. So this is an aerial photograph, just showing the application site outlined in red. And it's probably a good point, Zenny, to sort of point out a few features of the land and what's around it. So immediately to the south, of course, you've got Langley Common Road. The public right of way goes across the site, roughly where the cursor is now, and it sort of follows this tree and hedgerow belt and then stops just at the rear of the houses at Link Way. It's not, as I said in the committee report, it's not a free route, but it nevertheless is a public right of way that people have access to. This is Arborfield Studios, which is here, just to the south of Langley Common Road. I'll mention that sort of in my presentation a bit later on. And we've got Oakland's residential park, which is just where the cursor is here. So going sort of a bit more south, you've got Farley Hill Primary School, which is this sort of square here. This square development is Equestrian Court, which is part of the Arborfield Garrison development, or Arborfield Green, as it's known more recently. And I just highlight that because that's something used in the density calculation in my report. This is what I refer to as the Biggs Lane roundabout. So this is Biggs Lane going here. And you've got the district centre and Bow Hunt School, which is off the page, which is to the south. Going west, you've got Rickman Close, which is this row of houses here. You've got the Co-op, which is, you can probably just see the lighter reef, which is just where the cursor is. You've got Eversley Road going up to Arborfield, Observer Way, going up where the cursor is there. And then you've got the A327, which carries on around here. So just showing the site in it, this is just a bit more of a closer aerial image. You can see the site is bordered by hedgerows and trees and is an open field on the site. This triangle of land where the cursor is here isn't at this stage proposed to be developed, and this would be the ecological area. So this sort of sits outside of the enclosure of the tree belt, but this isn't at this stage proposed to be developed. The location of the new access, you may be able to make out, you may not be able to, but there's a field shelter here, which is just a grey rectangle. So the proposed access is just going more or less around there, and there's some photos just showing you in a bit more detail of where that is. So it's about 60 metres from Rickman Close. It's about 100 metres to the junction with the Biggs Lane roundabout. And then it's about 100 metres to the junction with the roundabout here. So this is an indicative framework plan. So this isn't a plan up for approval. It's just really to lay out how the development could potentially be laid out. So you can see that there's sort of green areas around the site are being largely retained, apart from the vehicle access, which will obviously have to punch through the existing hedgerow there. You can see there would be potentially a green sort of buffer for the right of way, showing the right of way can be retained. These two sort of broad, sort of, I guess, grey or beige areas. These is where the proposed houses would potentially be located. So what this plan's intending to do is just show you how a development could be laid out on the site for a quantum of 50 units. This is the highway plan. Hopefully you can see that it's quite bright, but so the proposed access is just here. You may be able to make out Rickman Close just here, so you can see the relationship there. There is marked on there the existing bus stop. So the proposal is to move the existing bus stop further north to this location here. And you'll be able to see as well, there's a signalised crossing here. That's, just to be clear, that's not part of the proposed development. That's part of the strategic works for the SDL site. So that Wokingham are in charge of those works coming forward, and that is proposed works which are planning to be undertaken. I don't believe there's a timetable for that yet, but that is something that is coming forward, that pedestrianised crossing. So just moving on to some photos. So this is from Biggs Lane looking northwards. So the application site is right in front. And you can just see some of the houses to Equestrian Court there, and the sort of the elbow houses, which are more related to the garrison. So this is still on Langley Common Road, looking eastwards. So you've got Langley Common Road to the right, obviously. Then you've got the field of the application sites to the left. You can see the general sort of trees and hedgerows around it. I'm stood taking those two photos, which are put together, more or less where the access would be located. So this is stood on the site. Again, it's 3 photos stitched together, facing south towards Langley Common Road. Again, you can see the nature of the open field. I think I'm broadly at this point stood on the sort of public right of way, although it's not clear apart from a trodden path to see exactly where it is. Again, you can see the general vegetation. You might just be able to make out the sign we were looking at in the last photo, the back of it there. So that's broadly where the new vehicular access will be located. This is looking more or less the same way, but stood right to the back of the site. So you've got Langley Common Road on your left-hand side. And as it sort of pinches towards the triangle, then you've got the trees and hedgerows that are at the back of the properties at Rickman Close. Again, you can sort of see the nature of the open field there. This is, appreciate these do look quite similar because it is a field of hedgerow, but this is facing north and east. So if you took out all those trees and hedgerows, you would be looking to Oakland's residential park. So you've got Langley Common Road, just where my cursor is, probably there. And then this is the trees and vegetation to the east, and then to the north here. And this is just a very close-up picture of the northern boundary, and this is where the right-of-way carries on into the neighbouring field, parallel with that hedgerow. So this is where the ecological area is intended to be. So this is slightly more open. It's actually sort of jumps the hedgerow and trees. But as I say, at this stage, it's not proposed to be developed. And you can just see the residential park there, the mobile homes. And there is a drainage, it's been sort of called a drainage ditch or an unmarked stream to the rear, or to the north rather, and this is just a photo just showing it. I think this is in October, this was taken. So just a couple of extra plans to show you. So this is just to show it in context with the Arborfield Garrison strategic development. The yellow part is the part which is proposed to be developed. This plan is taken from an outline stage. It's not actually how it's being laid out, because obviously you've got the school there and various other things, but it's really there intended to show that the Arborfield Studios is a temporary permission, and Langley Common Road is proposed to be developed into residential as part of the SDL strategic site. It's further worth noting as well, Chair, that in the local plan update, policy SS11 does actually propose, I'll just read it out now, 300 dwellings by optimising development density at land currently occupied by Arborfield Studios. So actually in the local plan update, the proposal is to actually densify what has been permitted along that section of the road. Now, obviously that has limited weight at this stage, and that's set out in the report, but it's just to sort of give a bit of context to that. So this plan here, hopefully it's relatively self-explanatory. So the yellow is the existing areas of built form and development. Purple is, I say, proposed in inverted commas. So you've got the site currently in consideration here. This other purple area is Barkham Square. Again, it's in the local plan update. However, that has limited weight at this stage, but it's just to sort of really highlight to members whereabouts that would be in relation. So as you can see here, there is still quite a significant gap of fields between Arborfield and Arborfield Garrison, or Arborfield Cross rather, and it doesn't extend any further northwards than the sort of top of Rickman Close, and just tends to round out the settlement there. So finally, Chair, I'll just make some concluding remarks, and then I'll hand back over. So just sort of going on to the planning balance. So I think the first thing the members will be probably well aware of is that the council can't demonstrate a 4-year housing land supply, and therefore we're in paragraph 11D territory of the NPPF, which is often which we refer to as the tilted balance. So what that states in paragraph 11D is granting permission. So I think it's worth highlighting, or very relevant to highlight, that's the starting point, that you're granting permission. Granting permission unless any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. Now, the key words to the second part of that is significantly and demonstrably. So that's the test which members need to think about when deliberating this proposal. So moving on to the pros of the development, it'd be 50 new dwellings in an area where we don't have a housing land supply, which is a weighty material consideration. 40% of that would be affordable homes, so 20 overall. Again, we're in a borough where we know there's an affordable need and we don't have a housing land supply. That's a weighty material consideration. There'd be new open spaces. There would also be economic benefits associated with the development. In terms of harm, it is acknowledged there would be landscape harm. However, whilst there would be some encroachment, there wouldn't be a coalescence of the settlements as per the previous plan that I showed, either perceived or physically. In terms of elements that weigh neutral in the planning balance from officers' recommendation, there's no objection from our highway officers. There's no objection from our professional drainage officers. There's no objection from our professional environmental health officers. With regard to ecology, there's in the section 106, there's provision to secure there'd be no net loss. Just to highlight, this application was submitted before the mandatory 10% biodiversity net gain. And as set out in the new biodiversity net gain sort of legislation, any loss of ecology on site can be dealt with an off-site contribution. However, the main ecological sort of features of this site include, which would be the trees and hedgerows, are largely being retained apart from the point of the access. In terms of other factors, in sustainability terms, we know it's not optimally located for sustainability, but there is access to facilities and services, as you will note in the report. And sort of looking at this in a bit of a wider context, so members may be aware of the Trials Lane application, which was in Swallowfield. So just to sort of draw some comparisons, that was for 81 dwellings, and obviously Swallowfield is a significantly smaller village with less sort of sustainable transport options and facilities. And whilst it was dismissed at committee or refused, it was allowed at appeal. And I'll just read you the inspector's conclusion. The development would conflict with the policies relating to the location of new development, protection of the landscape, and accessibility for facilities and services. It would therefore conflict with the development plan when taken as a whole. However, the presumption in favour of sustainable development contained in paragraph 11D of the framework points towards planning permission being granted. So paragraph 11D is what I just took members to and is referred to as the tilted balance. And then he goes on. In this case, I conclude that this significant material consideration outweighs the conflict with the development plan, notwithstanding the scale of the current shortfall in housing land and past delivery of housing in the borough. Consequently, I conclude the appeal should be allowed. And whilst each application must be considered on its merits, and I fully appreciate there be different merits to those different applications, this is not an outlier. You members will be aware of the School Road application in Hurst. Again, that was allowed at appeal. The Watmore Lane application in Winnash for 200 houses. Again, that was allowed at appeal. All similar considerations. So going back to the inspector's conclusions for Trials Lane and other appeals and the merits of this application, officers do not consider the adverse impacts significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. And as I say, this is consistent with previous government inspectors. Therefore, Chair, I'll pass it back over to you and I'll be happy to answer any further questions. So for those reasons, the application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions and the Section 106 heads of terms set out in the officer report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I've got 4 speakers. You've each got 3 minutes and we have a timer. Hopefully we can keep to that. First is Pam Stubbs from the Parish Council.
Right. This application came as something of a surprise. Having seen no action on this plan for almost a year, it's suddenly presented with a recommended for approval. This site is situated in quality countryside, good quality land between Arborfield and Barkham, in violation of the Arborfield and Barkham neighbourhood plan. In filling this area of countryside, that the residents have enjoyed by locals, with 50 houses, provides no material benefit to the area at all. Particularly as there's still some 2,000 houses plus to be built on Arborfield Green, and no infrastructure in sight at all at the moment. Expected facilities in the SDL are still awaited, and when completed, they will be outside of any walking distance from this particular site. The entrance to this development will add to the confusion of an already perilous roundabout at Biggs Lane, leading to Langley Common Road, a 40-mile-an-hour road. The residents of Rickman Close are already trying to cope with the extra traffic from the A327 and the walking route to the Co-op, which is the only available place to go. There is no separation from the SDL site, so there is little, if any, benefit to be gained. This site contains nothing but houses. Any benefit will come purely from that being provided by the SDL eventually. And it is a thin site. It will lead to more traffic along the Langley Common Road, then on to Barkham Road, and then to meet Barkham Ride and Barkham Street at the Bull, eventually joining the queues from Molly Miller's Lane right up to the railway crossing. This development benefits no one but the developer and is likely to spoil life for existing residents, particularly those who would wish to enjoy their small piece of countryside and not put up with this ill thought out plan. I urge the committee to reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam.
Right.
You had time to spare, well done. Okay, the next speaker is Hannah Slade, one of the residents.
Okay. This planning application is set to cause horrendous consequences for the residents of Rickman Close, like myself, as well as many others across Arborfield. The development of 50 houses will further increase the issues we currently suffer when turning onto the Langley Common Road. The council underestimates the level of traffic in the local area, especially during rush hour. I personally find it very difficult at times to turn out of Rickman Close. Even outside of rush hour, I have spent many minutes waiting to turn right. The claim of the average maximum waiting time for turning right during rush hour is 16 seconds is simply incorrect. Wokingham has above average car ownership with 1.6 cars per household, an average of 80 cars on the site. In addition to all their movements during rush hour, along with delivery vehicles, rubbish collectors and tradesmen will bring traffic to a standstill. There is a single bus route to Wokingham and Reading that stops just once per hour. The local road network is also far too dangerous to cycle on. The application fails to promote both public and active methods of transport, forcing even more cars onto our roads. We are also concerned about the effect of pollution on humans and wildlife with these added vehicles, bearing in mind the Prime Minister has just pledged to cut emissions by 81% by 2035. Residents have been waiting years for our community hubs, shops, cafes, a pub and a supermarket. All of these amenities were promised, and yet as they are not here, we're having to travel further away for all these services. To approve more houses whilst the required services are still yet to be completed would be unsustainable in our local community, as even whilst the current level of services is inadequate for the area, the number of houses that are yet to be built keep any increase thinly stretched. The few services that are available are too far or too uphill to comfortably walk. As for myself and the residents of Rickman Close, our gardens are situated lower than the adjacent field and many of our gardens flood numerous times a year. There does not appear to be any provision for ensuring that this development will not make the situation even worse. Additionally, the increase in light and noise pollution is set to cause a great deal of harm to not only us but local wildlife that the area boasts as a selling point. This development is in land designated as countryside, and building on the land will change Arborfield Green and Cross forever, as it significantly shrinks the gap between the two villages. It makes us incredibly sad to see this development recommended for approval. It is clear that the evidence presented shows that these houses will do far more harm than good through its violation of so many of Wokingham's planning policies, such as CP 1, 3, 4, 6, 9 and 11 at the very least. Therefore, I ask that you please refuse permission for this application.
Thank you. Thank you, Hannah. The next person to speak is Beverly Moss. She's the agent on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. The applicant acknowledges that the principle of developing the land for housing is contrary to the spatial strategy of the adopted local plan. However, this needs to be considered against the Council's current shortfall in housing supply and the identified benefits of the scheme. The site is not in any beneficial agricultural use. It is private land. Your officer is satisfied that the development would not undermine the separation of Arborfield Cross and the redeveloped Arborfield Garrison or Arborfield Green, with significant areas of open countryside remaining between them. The site sits on the edge of Arborfield Garrison in a popular area of the district within walking distance of an Ofsted good rated primary school, a local co-op, and on a bus route. The site is not subject to any specific landscape designations. Notably, it is not within the valued landscape area in the emerging draft local plan update. Yes, development would extend built form into a field. However, as your officer notes, the site is well related to the existing urban elements, with development and road corridors to the west, south and east. The site is an unremarkable field which is visually and physically well contained, and the landscape assessment work shows how existing vegetation will filter the majority of views of the site, from wider vantage points to up-close views from the highway. The illustrative development plan indicates how the site could be developed for up to 50 new homes, alongside areas of open space, the biodiversity space and a children's play area. Of the 37 individual and 11 groups of existing trees, only a small section of an overgrown hedgerow would need to be removed in order to provide the access. The existing public right-of-way through the site is also shown to be retained. The proposals also include 20 new affordable homes on site, which is a significant benefit and wholly fits in with the government's ministerial statement from July, which sets out very clearly that local authorities must look at ways to deliver a greater share of genuinely affordable homes. Granting permission for the proposals would show that the council is looking to improve affordability in the district. All technical issues have been addressed. Your officers have no concerns with the impacts that the new homes might have on issues of flood risk, drainage, highways and ecology, with the applicant making the necessary contribution to SANG. And other financial contributions would also be made to improving the bus services, an employment and skills plan and additional ecological matters. To conclude, before members is an outline housing scheme which could translate into a high quality housing development for a medium-sized developer. All technical issues have been addressed and your officers have no concerns. I therefore respectfully ask you to issue a positive resolution in line with your officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Next person to speak is Councillor Joseph Barley.
The application before you tonight, if approved, won't just cause further damage to Arborfield through overdevelopment, but it will set a dangerous precedent that it is acceptable for developments to encroach out of the strictly defined boundaries of the borough's strategic development locations. The site is situated in land designated as countryside outside of the Arborfield Green SDL settlement boundary. This is set to significantly reduce the separation between Arborfield Green and Arborfield Cross, and even WBC's very own trees and landscape team agree with this, having stated that settlement separation will be significantly harmed by the proposed development as the retention of open countryside cannot be maintained. Now, by expanding the SDL's development towards Arborfield Cross, it opens the floodgates for further developments outside of the SDL on the northern side of Langley Common Road. Now, this site was not recommended for housing allocation in the emerging LPU for some of the aforementioned reasons. Local plans are drafted on the basis that the developments included are supposed to be sustainable or, at worst, the least sustainable option. However, Arborfield Green's local infrastructure already cannot cope. With 1,000 or so houses yet to be built in Finchwood Park, 900 penciled in at Barkham Square, and nearly 4,000 planned just a mile away at Hall Farm, this unsustainable addition is set to put a further strain on our community. This report has not taken any of these figures nor the existing pressures into account when calculating the effects that this development will have on sustainability, transport and service provision. Now, for example, new primary and secondary school children are having to be sent to schools in Finchampstead and Wokingham due to the lack of education provision in the villages and in the ward. And the lack of a GP surgery also forces patients to travel much further afield to access NHS services. Now, this results in residents having to travel further on more congested roads in private vehicles due to a lack of adequate highway infrastructure, public transport provision, and the provision of necessary services in the area. Now, even if the LPU was actually at an early stage, the drawbacks of this application would still massively outweigh the benefits. The minor increase in housing supply the borough will gain is outweighed by its unsuitability, detrimental effects, and lack of benefit to the surrounding community, whilst thousands of other homes are already soon to come within its immediate vicinity. Now, the LPU is set to address the housing land supply technicality that this application hinges on. And given that Planning Officer Ian Bellinger stated at Climate Emergency ONS last week that the LPU is at an advanced stage, it's clear that the LPU and its policies should be given a greater weight than what this report allows. Now, the evidence shows that the application contradicts a minimum of CP 1, 3, 4, 6, 9, 11 and 18 of the core policy strategy and related MDD plan strategies, as well as SS 1, 2, 3, 5, 11, 15, 17 and C1 and 3 of the emerging LPU. All three councillors, the parish councils and the residents of Barkham and Arborfield have examined the application closely, and we're united in our conviction that this should not be approved and that the evidence we've provided to you proves this course of action to be a necessity. I therefore ask you tonight that you refuse permission for this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those contributions. We now go into committee and ask the committee members to for their observations, please. Who wants to start us off? Looking around. Moses.
I thought there's somebody virtual. Right.
They are virtual, but they're not speaking. Can I just say that what we've heard, just from the speakers, let alone the officer, is that we've heard reasons against this application and some reasons for. So I think if we could have that discussion about the pros and cons, that would be useful. But somebody does need to start the process.
I want to start from the clause 69 on page 56, which one of the speakers referenced, that the maximum delay would be on average be around 16 seconds in both the AM and PM peaks for traffic turning right out of the site. I went for the site visit. It took me nearly 5 minutes to turn left. So I'm not quite sure how you can turn right in 16 seconds. Can somebody explain? Is that a typo?
Martin, would you like to address that?
It's not a typo. The access was modelled through nationally accepted junction software with agreed traffic flows and geometries, and that was what that came out of the modelling. This delay was coming out of the site.
So let me clarify. So
No clapping and no.
Sorry. Okay, Moses now. So Moses.
So the access is coming to Langley Common Road. Will not be any different from coming out of Rickman Close. Okay. So when we went on site with Carol, we parked on Rickman Close. So if I was turning left, I would be going north. So there'll be no traffic obstruction. If I was turning right, I'll be contending with traffic coming from my right. So how can a model tell me it takes 16 seconds to turn right when it took me nearly 5 minutes to turn left with no traffic, with no oncoming traffic? Because if I'm turning right, it means I have to wait for the cars coming from my right, won't I? So I'm trying to understand how that works, because I do understand how modeling works. Models do have a quirk. 16 seconds is almost impractical for a turning on any road, really.
Can I say, yeah, thank you, Moses.
Because we're talking about reality here and what the model is saying. And I'm saying it took me, we went to site together. It took me 5 minutes to come onto the road, going left. So if I was going to come back, I have to wait for cars from my right. 16 seconds.
I would just highlight that the access is in a materially different location because you're coming from Rickman Close, because that's right next to the roundabout. So I agree, it is more difficult to turn there because you're trying to preempt various directions of traffic. Whereas on Langley Common Road, it's laterally, you're just considering two flows.
Sorry.
So it's a two-way road, Langley Common Road. At Rickman Close, you're closer to the roundabout.
Yes, I'm close to the roundabout. Surely, even if I moved 60 meters to the right, to the left, cars will still be coming this from my right. So I will still have to wait for the cars before I can enter the road and turn right. So I'm saying that it took me longer to turn left. So if I was turning left from Rickman's Close, same it will be from the new access, from the new development. If I'm turning left, it took me longer. So if I'm going to turn right, if it takes 16 seconds, the road is literally empty.
It doesn't. I don't think it says 16 seconds. It be additional delay. I see on that one. Yeah. So
delay. It means it's the waiting time. Additional delay of 16 seconds. Yes. So the maximum will be on average, and I'm saying it's going to be much more from my experience.
Excuse me, Chair.
Yeah.
That additional delay is caused by the additional traffic from the development. The development of 50 houses would, based on our approved trip rates and the nationally accepted trip database, would be around 20 vehicles coming out and 7 coming in the AM peak, which is the busiest AM peak. Based on that increase in traffic, the 16 seconds is the increase in delay caused by that 20 vehicles coming out. That's where the 16 seconds comes from. It is not the delay on Langley Common Road. It is not the delay on any other junction. It is increase in delay on that area caused by the traffic from the development. That's the increase in delay. So you've got 20 odd vehicles coming out when you've got 1,200 plus two-way traffic in the AM peak on that section of the road. You're talking about a 2% increase in traffic. And that 2% increase in traffic caused by this development led to an increase, I repeat, an increase in delay of 16 seconds. It is not a delay of 16 seconds. It is an increase in already measured delay on that area. It's an increase in delay caused by the development.
Moses, I can understand what's being said there.
I understand the explanation. What I'm saying is, if the status quo means that it's already difficult to come onto the road, I cannot see how 50 additional homes, possible additional 75 cars is going to make traffic any better. I don't believe the 16 seconds, basically.
Okay, thank you. Clearly, that's an objection on the traffic grounds on highways. Has anybody else got any other debate or any other question they want on this application, either on highways or beyond that? Yes, Mark.
I had a question about a neighbourhood plan. Basically, Mark, the neighbourhood plan has several policies, and I know it is recognized that this will harm or this has a negative impact on the separation. I think it's about 20% reduction in the separation between Arborfield and Arbor Green. And you could argue, is that sufficient or not? But there is also a policy in the neighborhood plan which I think it says AD3, new housing outside development limits. And it says, if housing is to be consented, except replacing, approximately 50% of the site should be open space. I know we're not planning here a specific part of where the houses are going to be, but this 50 dwellings would not really be in line with that neighborhood plan policy. Is that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of issues there. I'm just having a quick look at AD3. Sorry, I don't quite see the 50% open space sections. I don't know if you could perhaps have a look and draw my attention to it. With regard to the separation of settlements, the relevant policy in the neighbourhood plan is IRS 1. And as I've set out in the reports, there would be encroachment into the open space between the settlements, but as the sort of slide I showed up, the slide I put up showing the retention of the fields between Arborfield Cross and Arborfield Garrison, it's not so there would be a visual or perceived coalescence, and that this site would be read in the context of Arborfield Green or Arborfield Garrison.
Thank you. Has anybody else got any comments or questions? Yes, Moses.
Question on the school provision plus 117, 118, page 63. So 50 additional homes. The report says the schools are already oversubscribed. So if in a particular year you have 2 children from each home, so we assume, say, between 50 and 100, even one, how would that increase, how would that reduce the pressure on the schools, even if people currently people from neighboring parishes come to the place? So imagine I have 200 new kids in a particular year wanting to go into the secondary school. How does that mitigate the already oversubscribed situation with the schools in a place?
Yes, the first point to mention is the school place planning manager hasn't objected to the scheme. He was quite clear on that. And what he did say, which I've summarised in the report, is you're correct, Farley Hill Primary School is running at capacity. But what he has said is that there are other schools at Arborfield Cross and Gorse Ride where where pupils from this development would attend Farley Hill, pupils from further afield that may be in proximity to Gorse Ride or the Coombs and Arborfield Cross would be able to utilise those schools. They are not running at capacity. And as you'll be aware, Arborfield Garrison is quite a large site, so it's the houses down to the south will be potentially easier to get to Finch Hampstead than they would Farley Hill Primary School. It's a similar scenario for Bowhunt School, and the school place planning manager, again, he quite clearly set out that whilst Bowhunt is at capacity, it takes children from further afield, particularly Shinfield, and there is the 8 Bank School at Shinfield, which isn't oversubscribed, it's undersubscribed. So there are factors that children taking these places at Farley Hill and Bowhunt School may displace other children, which should be closer to other schools. As I say, he hasn't objected, so that is a weighty consideration in itself. The other thing to take into account is in terms of the overall scale of development, it's relatively small in the grand scheme of things. I appreciate 50 homes isn't taken lightly. Obviously, the residents have significant concerns about that, but it is relatively small when you consider the whole of Arborfield Garrison. The third pertinent point is that the development is liable to SEAL contributions, and part of the infrastructure spending plan is that part of this would go to education, and that's something the school place planning manager again set out, that this would be SEAL liable, and that's the mechanism to get funding for additional school places, which this development will be paying. So whilst I appreciate the point, it's not the case where children from the application site would have to go significantly further afield to access schools. It'd be the case where children potentially much further out from those schools would go to other schools which may be closer.
Could I just add a point that there is educational provision plan within additional educational provision plan within the SDL, I think at Finchwood Park, which is not in place at the moment, but it's due to be as the population increases.
So, Mark, I know you keep referring to the school place planning manager. I gave you figures, and I gave you what I think could be potential number of new intake. You referred to Oak Bank. I was a governor at Oak Bank. And I'm asking the question, are you suggesting that Bohunt currently takes maybe 100 people from Shanefield, that if you now had additional 100 pupil students, Bohunt, those people were displaced, and then you will be able to cope? That's what I'm asking. I'm giving you numbers based on my personal experience of.
I mean, this development won't generate 100 children if that's what you're referring to. I don't think that's feasible in any metric.
They could generate 50.
Not at secondary school place. It'd be quite rare for every house to have a secondary school child, and that's not the metrics we've used for other application sites. So there may be every house will have a child, but to say they'd all be at secondary school, I think would be unrealistic, if I'm completely honest. And what the school place planning manager has had a look at, I don't know the metrics they've used, but they do use metrics in terms of how many sort of primary and secondary age children, and again looking at nursery age children and splitting that up between infant children, is that they consider that they gave an example of Oak Bank and Shinfield. They're not saying that all the places would, they would all go to Shinfield. They just gave an example of how currently Bohunt School draws in pupils from outside of Arborfield.
So my last question on schools, because the officers keep referring to SEAL, but most times this infrastructure tend to lag home development. So you could have homes in place, and before you get the school expanded, or it could be years, and those problems are real. So whether there's provision for SEAL, it doesn't guarantee that the infrastructure will be in place when they are required.
No, I think you make a good point there. Thank you. So we've got the people's concern about the moment Moses' concern about the traffic and schools. I'd like to move it on to see what the other reasons, or if anybody's got a proposal for a recommendation for this site. So I'm looking around if anybody else wants to speak. Greg.
I just wanted to ask a question about the other developments that were referred to by our colleague, Councillor Barley. He mentioned figures of 900 and larger developments. Is that something that we as a committee tonight can take into account, or is that something that is outside of this decision?
It depends on what context you want to take that into account, because it is obviously material that Arborfield is still building out, particularly with the facilities and services that will go there. For example, Brian just mentioned additional school places. I think the supermarket's planning to start work around January. There's in the district centre, there'll be 18 commercial units. So it is material in that sense. So it depends how you want to link it in, I guess. But it's material that the fact that Arborfield is still being built out and it is still coming forward.
But I just add to that, thanks, Mark, that the fact that Arborfield has an existing substantial amount of development at present and is being built out in future means that the situation in Arborfield, it is only going to increase in terms of a place and the level of facilities and connectivity it enjoys, rather than decreasing or getting worse in terms of facilities and connectivity.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question, Greg? Yes. Okay.
But I just want a bit of follow-up, because I'm also struggling a little bit with this one. and that is about the sustainability. I mean, Arborfield is in flux. Yeah, there's a lot of housing being built. Sustainability is my concern. It's already a little bit on a knife edge, with places with the growing of a smaller village into a larger village. There's still a lot of activities ongoing. So I know the obvious reasons for the policies that it is outside the developments. It will reduce the barrier, the separation. I think it's also not aligned with the neighborhood plan. But on the other hand, I can see the benefits because we have a short land supply. We can build the 50 houses. This would be a great addition to mitigate that one. I can see the economic benefits of it. So you have those tipping ones, but it's the sustainability part that is tipping it for me in one or the two directions, and that's what I'm a bit struggling with, because Arborfield is growing fast. There's still a lot of sustainability parts that sort of need to get settled and matured, including traffic and public transport and maybe the other parts. And so it's more also about, is this the right timing to do this one even, I mean, on top of the fact that I think, this is, it's a good field. It has a right of way to it. It is not like last month's hillside view. This is a countryside which has a public right of way through it, which, if you jump over the fence, if you've seen the pictures, you're in the countryside, you feel you're in the countryside. So you have all those aspects, which we know, and also Beverly recognizes those ones. But it's that sustainability part at the moment that I have the feeling it is a little bit on the knife edge, the village already, and there's a lot of development still ongoing. So there's on top of it, this 50, you might say 50 is not a lot compared to the 300, but it could also be, you could see it as the straw that breaks the camel's back in a way. And that is where I am. I don't know what other people think of those sort of issues. No clapping. Can we not have any clapping, please? That doesn't help anybody here at this stage.
Thank you. I think just to so I understand your concern, it's not necessarily that Arborfield is unsustainable. It's just that at this stage where things are coming forward, it's not clear how sustainable it is at this stage in time. Is that fair or?
Partly, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you have the normal issues that it is outside the development plan, that this reducing the gap. But if you have to look at the sustainability part, this at the moment it is under a lot of flux and a lot of stress. And then to add this one, you could either go with saying like, well, 50, is it going to do any harm because it's only 50, and we already, the others ones you're talking about 300 or more, But on the other hand, you could say like, could this be the camel that not the camel that breaks the back, but the straw that breaks the camel's back, and that is what I'm sort of.
Yeah, so in the core strategy, Arborfield was one of the 4 strategic development locations. So it's sort of a flagship settlement in terms of, this is a sustainable, Arborfield is a sustainable location put forward in our previous plan, which was adopted. It's a flagship settlement in that respect. It was set out in the policy for 3,500 houses. Just initially, obviously, that's kind of, that will change as the reserve matters come in. But that was the level of growth that was proposed in the core strategy. So for the additional 50 houses, I think my calculations were 1.5% increase. So it's very nominal when you consider the overall growth for Arborfield Garrison. And I think, like I say, Arborfield Garrison is a sort of flagship sustainable development from our previous core strategy. So I'd be very wary of underplaying that and saying, well, actually, it's not sustainable. I think your question was, again, to be fair, was regarding timings. Now, that's the case with any sort of large strategic site coming forward. I don't think it would be material to say, well, you know, that they're not going to be, some certain facilities aren't coming forward for another couple of years, so let's delay it. I think just to sort of give some context on that, the government makes very clear that even if you have an allocated site, or a reserve site rather, and there's an application for it, you cannot refuse it on prematurity grounds. Now, this isn't quite a case of prematurity grounds, but I think it does give a flavour of how the government views stopping development because you think it's too early. I think inspectors would take quite a dim view of that, if I'm honest, from my professional experience. Like I say, I think the salient facts in terms of looking at this, in terms of the material consideration, is Arborfield is a highly sustainable settlement. It's one of the 4 large sites set out in our adopted core strategy and which we rely on for our housing land supply. So I don't think there can be any case that you know, a development relying on Arborfield would be unsustainable, notwithstanding sort of distances and the things I've taken into my report. So I understand what you're saying, but I don't think the sort of staggered nature of Arborfield coming forward would be a sound ground to resist the development.
So could I ask then if there was an objection to it on sustainability, and we couldn't say that nothing is there yet, or it's not going to be ready for several years, are there any other reasons of sustainability that we could use? Because it's clearly, there is this huge gap between what is expected in the vicinity and what there is at the moment, and it is putting huge pressure, and in that sense is unsustainable. So it's really just trying to clarify what you've said. We can't actually delay any application because of that, things not being ready. But there has to be some recognition that that infrastructure isn't in place.
I think the challenge will be is that it's on the council to deliver that. It's for us to determine the planning applications and make sure those applications come forward. This isn't a case where we're not quite sure that you know, there might be something proposed, but nothing's really been sort of set out, which does happen from time to time. You know, there may be a proposal down the road which there's a bit of ambiguity whether it will come forward. This is a certainty that you know, the district centre is coming forward, that you know, there's outline permissions and there's reserve matters permissions for that. So yeah, with regard to sort of, I guess, the broader question in terms of sustainability, as you can see in the report, I've mentioned about distances and some of them not being optimal. That is a material consideration. However, as I've sort of set out in the introduction, there are quite clearly facilities with good walk-in distances and infrastructure. The other issue as well is, as I say, Arborfield Garrison has been strategically developed to be sustainable, so it is being developed with good footpath infrastructure and cycle lane infrastructure. So any sort of way, you know, the houses will predominantly rely on Arborfield Garrison, so any southward travel is going through what we've developed as and what we consider a highly sustainable settlement with infrastructure.
Thank you very much.
Chair, can I just add to that briefly? In addition to that, members will be aware of obviously the Reg 19 local plan update, which is out to consultation, and the specific allocation for an increased strategic development location on Arborfield, adjacent to Arborfield Green at Barkham Square. Now, this is obviously an additional 600 homes on the side of the SDL, and this follows on from earlier phases being completed: Bowhunt Secondary School, Farley Hill Primary School, the infrastructure, roads, Observer Way, etc. The fact that 600 homes is deemed appropriate to include and promote within our local plan should give members committee here some confidence that there is the ability, with ongoing infrastructure been granted, as Mark has said, a second secondary school, new employment, sports facilities, parks, allotments and play areas, which are being rolled out as demand and phases increase. That should hopefully give some comfort that 50 houses, rather than the 600 we're talking about in the SDL, is again not going to be so substantial that it will affect the availability of infrastructure or the sustainability of the wider SDL, which officers would strongly argue it wouldn't in any respect.
Thank you very much. I think in an ideal world, we all know what we'd like to see here, but we have an application in front of us, and we need to have a recommendation from committee members so that we can move forward and have a vote on whether we want to approve this or whether we want to reject it. If we're going to reject it, we do need reasons for that rejection. So anybody want to take it from there, or are we going to have a bit of a stalemate here, because we do have to move on, otherwise these guys will be here all evening. Moses.
I think the report already gives us a clue of one grounds for refusal, because the report is in breach of CP1 and CP11, because it says here there will be the development will harm the character and appearance of the area, and it weighs against the proposal. And the tree and landscape officer was categorical that the settlement separation will significantly harm by the proposed development. So there's already an encroachment on the countryside. So in addition to the sustainability issues, I think it's always easy for people to say treat every application exclusively. But if we're talking about schools, I'm aware that a secondary school was planned for the start of M4 in 2011. And that secondary school is yet to be delivered, which is putting pressure. So we should not, even if 50 is immaterial compared to 600, but it grows the number and makes the case worse, not better.
Thank you. Martin, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, there are grounds to refuse, which are clear, but are also the benefits, that you're gonna, we don't have a land supply, and we also, this could bring economic benefits. So it's that balance that we need to do, and Mark has come up with that balance. We might have a different balance on that one, and that's okay. But yeah, go ahead, Mo.
So if 50 will not make a difference in the negative direction, how does it make a significant difference in the positive direction?
Good question.
If I may, Chair, sort of just taking a step back from the specifics, Martin's helpfully just sort of hinted on the benefits of a proposed development. In this case, you have 50 new homes in front of you at a council that can't meet its current identified housing needs, let alone its the acute affordable housing needs. We're getting policy compliant affordable housing on site in a location which is acknowledged to be across the road from a strategic development location. So that's the kind of facts where the presentation at the beginning, Mark helpfully outlined the fact that the development would result in the loss of a field. It's quite a narrow site, as the parish representative made reference to. It's not a particularly deep site. It doesn't occupy a significant amount of the land between Arborfield Cross and this settlement, and therefore obviously officers' conclusions and evidence, as you discussed and heard tonight, that issues of coalescence are not necessarily reasons to withhold planning permission. Educational capacity has been covered with technical input from our homes placement officer, and highways input has sort of concluded there's no objection. The committee needs to, firstly, I would say, is understand whether they agree with the benefits of this scheme, not just in terms of housing 50 homes or 40% affordable, but in terms of the fact that there are social, environmental and economic benefits to the scheme as outlined in the report. And if that is understood and those benefits accepted, then putting that aside, taking, for example, landscape harm, members would need to understand and explain to the members of the public how that harm to this field that's enclosed, which is supported, by landscape visual impact assessments and associated evidence, how that harm significantly and demonstrably outweighs those identified benefits that members have understood around the table. So we need to undertake that exercise, as Martin was alluding to, and that the scales aren't even. The government have, through a mechanism of the NPPF, tilted the scales so that the harm needs to significantly and adversely, demonstrably outweigh those identified benefits that we've identified. The NPPF, you say, Moses, how 50 homes is a benefit or not a benefit or negative. The NPPF requires us to significantly boost the supply of housing. That is the presumption. And the presumption at the start of the NPPF national policy is the presumption in favour of development unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The starting point is positive. The harm, the consequences, they need to be discussed. They need to be evidenced. They need to be justified. Because again, if we have any chance of defending a council decision, we need reasons and they need to be robust. And as Mark identified at the beginning, currently, we're not successful in defending refusals of much larger and arguably much more harmful schemes than 50 dwellings on the edge of an SDL. So on that spectrum of harm, where we've dealt with in the last 4 or 5 committees, some quite large, in the hundreds, 350, 250 houses, which do, from the council's view, introduce issues of coalescence, loss of landscape, ecological impacts, highway impacts. Those developments, again, need to frame how we're viewing this development. Now, if members are of the same view that equally this development is as harmful as a much larger development elsewhere, then we would need that information, that evidence.
Thank you, Brian. That's made that very clear. Yes, Stan.
Thank you, Chair. No, I think we've had some good sort of points across the board. I think, on the negative side, I think, there's definitely a risk of increased urbanisation. I think I'm particularly concerned about the conflation between sort of Arborfield Cross and Langley Common Road, and I think ultimately, yes, we will be losing, the field, and I think that is green space ultimately. But I think my worry is that if we do reject this today, I'm of the belief that I think if it went to appeal, I think it would go through, and I do think that the sort of the wider net benefit of, when that happens, there's no sale, there's less money for community, there's a net negative impact of that. So I think we need to, and also what we're saying no to is actually would be saying no to 20 affordable homes as well. So that's 20 families potentially who are on a list waiting for a home, looking for somewhere to live. You're saying no to that as well, and I think that's just on balance. We need to think, what we're actually going to be saying no to.
Thank you, Sam. That's very helpful. Anybody else want to comment on the benefits? Let's look at it that way to begin with. Or is that all very clear? I think Sam's carried on from what Brian said. We need to move on. And to move on, I need a proposal. The only one I vaguely got at the moment, I think, is for Moses, who has...
Maybe, I think just want to get the benefits out so that there's, we have the land supply, we have economic benefits, we have potential sale, we have social houses. Yeah, those are all weighing in favor of this one. I think it's not overdeveloped with density wise. I think from the highways, they've done the modeling. It's very difficult for us to argue against it and say that maybe we feel it's different, but that modeling I'm going with. I think the drainage ones, the drainage flooding, I know people have risk of flooding, but the modeling, the strategy shows that it's sufficient at the moment. So those are more neutral, and then you have the benefits. the benefits, but you have the downside for me is, you know, it's encroaching towards the Arborfield Green. It is outside the development limit. It's also, you know, not aligned with the neighborhood plan that they have done, and so that's the balance I'm weighing out and considering. I don't know if anybody else has other parts on that one. Go ahead.
Can I just to assist members, and this is a purely helpful suggestion, that there is not necessarily, in order to have a vote, there is not necessarily the need here at this immediate moment to have any reasons. You have a recommendation in front of you, and the committee can go to a vote at any time on the recommendation that's being presented to you as a default. That is the starting point. And if members, after hearing the debate or hearing the answers, decide that that recommendation is not for them, then again, that can possibly assist in arriving at alternative reasons, rather than trying to start with alternative reasons if there's still questions.
Chair, yes, just to clarify, but really elaborate on Brian's point, you have a recommendation in front of you at the moment. If it takes a member and another member to push forward that motion and it to be seconded, you can move to a vote on that recommendation. Equally, if there's a member who puts a recommendation to reject it and that is seconded, and that happens before a recommendation of Officer Redmond, then you hear that one first. But certainly that's there. If members were of a view to put the motion to accept Officer's recommendation, second it, you can move to a vote at that point.
So we do need a recommendation, even though we have a recommendation on the agenda from the officer. Sam, you'd obviously put forward some benefits there. Did you want to put forward a recommendation of approval? Okay, do I have a seconder for that, please? Beck. Okay, so we can then go to a vote. So can I just make clear that we're suggesting or recommending conditional approval, that it will be based on what's in the agenda papers that the officer has come up with. We have heard both sides, and I think we've given it a thorough discussion on the disbenefits and the benefits. It's not a perfect world, and we have to deal with things as they come up. So could I have a show of hands of those that support that recommendation for approval, please? Got those, and those against. Don't see there's any abstentions, but we've covered it all, haven't we?
You've got casting vote.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Having voted for conditional approval to begin with, I will do that again with much regret, because I don't like seeing this sort of piecemeal development. But we are bound by the government's legislation, what they do, and by the appeal situation. So this is conditional approval. That concludes the meeting. Thank you very much. We finished the meeting, so you can speak. Smiling.